The Crithian diplomatic delegation had practiced their opening speech for 3 cycles, but humanity's response was a string of numbers. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more HFY stories. Ambassador Velrus stood at the observation deck of the Harmonious Accord, her primary manipulators clasped behind her carapace in what her species considered a posture of diplomatic confidence. Through the reinforced viewport, the boundary of human-claimed space stretched before them, a seemingly ordinary expanse of stars that had, in the past standard year, become the most contested border in the sector. "Transmission prepared, Ambassador," her communications officer announced, his vocal crest fluttering with barely contained pride. Full diplomatic protocol. Translation matrix verified across 17 linguistic frameworks. Cultural sensitivity markers embedded throughout. Velrus allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. 3 months they had spent preparing for this moment. 3 months analyzing every scrap of data the Commonwealth had gathered about these newcomers who called themselves humans. A species that had emerged from a backwater system and claimed a modest sphere of territory with surprising boldness. A species that had, thus far, declined all contact with neighboring powers. Until now. "Send it," Velrus commanded. The message was a masterwork of diplomatic craft, carefully balanced between respect and strength, acknowledging humanity's sovereignty, while subtly establishing the Crithian Commonwealth's position as the dominant regional power. It proposed a formal summit to discuss territorial boundaries, trade frameworks, and mutual defense protocols. It suggested several neutral meeting locations. It offered 3 possible dates for initial discussions, each months apart, to allow for proper preparation. It was, in every measure, a perfect opening to what Velrus expected would be a lengthy negotiation process. The response came 17 seconds later. 17 seconds! Velrus's dorsal ridge stiffened in surprise. "Communications officer, verify the transmission routing. That's not sufficient time for—" "Verification complete, Ambassador. The response originated from within human space. Transmission time is consistent with proximity to their border monitoring stations." Velrus felt a flutter of unease in her secondary stomach. 17 seconds wasn't enough time for proper diplomatic review, for consultation with advisors, for the careful consideration that separated civilized negotiation from crude posturing. "Display the message." The holographic interface flickered to life. Velrus stared at it, her compound eyes widening in confusion. It was a set of coordinates. Nothing more. No greeting. No acknowledgement of their carefully crafted proposal. No counter-suggestions or diplomatic pleasantries. Just spatial coordinates in standard galactic notation, followed by a timestamp, 72 hours from present. "This is irregular," murmured Science Director Thad. From his station near the environmental controls, his scales had shifted to a pale blue, the Crithian expression of intellectual perplexity. "Irregular?" Security Commander Dravix's voice carried a sharp edge. "Oh, it's insulting. 3 months of preparation, and they respond with map coordinates, like we're cargo haulers receiving delivery instructions." Velrus studied the numbers, her mind racing through possibilities. The coordinates pointed to a location approximately 14 light hours inside human-claimed space, not deep enough to represent a trap, but far enough to constitute a clear invitation into their territory. "Could this be a translation error?" she asked. "Perhaps their response systems misinterpreted our diplomatic codes?" The communications officer's crest flattened in disagreement. "Negative, Ambassador. The coordinates are transmitted in perfect standard notation. If anything, the precision suggests advanced communications capability." "The timestamp is exact to the millisecond." "Then perhaps it's a cultural idiosyncrasy," Velrus suggested, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "Some species prefer direct action to prolonged discussion. The humans may simply be efficient." "Or arrogant," Dravix countered. They ignore every diplomatic protocol, provide no context, no explanation. They expect us to simply appear at a location of their choosing, on their schedule, without negotiation. Velris couldn't entirely disagree. In her 40 cycles of diplomatic service, she had never encountered such a response. The Zenthara would have replied with poetry. The Molkari would have sent technical specifications for their preferred meeting facilities. Even the aggressive Torvan Empire would have at least acknowledged the message before issuing demands. But humans? Humans sent coordinates. Analysis, Velris ordered, turning to Thane. What do we know about this location? The science director manipulated his console, pulling up star charts and sensor data. The coordinates place us in a relatively empty sector, no major stellar bodies, no known installations or phenomena. Navigationally unremarkable. It's essentially empty space. Tactically? Velris glanced at Dravix. The security commander's expression darkened. Tactically, it's neutral territory within their claimed space. No natural hazards, but also no natural cover. Open space typically favors whoever has superior sensor range and weapons reach. He paused. We have no data on human military capabilities. That was the core of their uncertainty, Velris realized. For all their preparation, for all their intelligence gathering, humanity remained fundamentally unknown. They had appeared, claimed territory, and then gone silent. No broadcasts leaked beyond their borders. No merchants emerged with tales of their worlds. No defectors brought intelligence to neighboring powers. It was as if humanity had drawn a line in space and dared the galaxy to cross it. And now that same mysterious species had responded to the Commonwealth's diplomatic overture with nothing but coordinates and a deadline. Recommendations? Velris asked her senior staff. We should demand clarification, Dravix said immediately. Send another message requesting proper diplomatic protocols. We don't respond to cryptic summons like subordinates. That could delay first contact by months, Thane countered. If this is their preferred method of communication, and insisting on our protocols might be interpreted as inflexibility. Velris felt the weight of decision settling on her carapace. The Commonwealth had authorized this mission with clear objectives. Establish contact with humanity, assess their intentions, and secure favorable terms for territorial boundaries and resource rights. The Krathian Commonwealth controlled 17 systems in this sector. Humans claimed only 5. By any logical measure, the Commonwealth should be negotiating from a position of strength. Yet something about those bare coordinates unsettled her. We proceed, Gadarwayu, she decided. Set course for the provided coordinates. Maintain full sensor sweeps. Security protocols at level 3. Ambassador, Dravix began. They responded to our message, Commander. That indicates willingness to engage. The manner of their response is unconventional, but not necessarily hostile. Velris straightened, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. We came here to make contact with humanity. They've provided a time and place. We'd be remiss not to attend. As the Harmonious Accord adjusted course, its engines humming with accumulated power, Velris returned to studying those coordinates. Just numbers. Simple, precise, cold numbers. She had prepared 17 different opening speeches for various diplomatic scenarios. She had studied human linguistic patterns from their few public broadcasts. She had even practiced what limited information suggested might be human greeting gestures. But as the stars slid past the viewport and the ship accelerated toward unknown space, Velris couldn't shake one persistent thought. What kind of species responds to an offer of negotiation with nothing but a destination? And more troubling still, what were they going to find when they arrived? The journey to the coordinates took 68 hours at maximum diplomatic cruise speed. Every hour that passed added another layer of tension to the Harmonious Accord's atmosphere. Velrus had stopped counting how many times she'd reviewed the sparse human response. The coordinates remained unchanged. No follow-up messages arrived, no clarifications, no diplomatic courtesies. Just those numbers, hanging in space like a challenge. Approaching the designated location, the navigation officer announced. ETA, 47 minutes. Sensor report, Velrus commanded. Thane studied his displays, on his scales shifting through shades of blue and gray, confusion mixed with concentration. Long-range scans show nothing, Ambassador. No ships, no stations, no artificial structures, no energy signatures beyond background radiation. The coordinates point to empty space. Empty. Dravix moved to the science station, his combat-trained eyes narrowing at the data. Verify sensor calibration. Calibration confirmed. All systems nominal. Thane's crest flattened in frustration. If there's anything at these coordinates, it's either powered down completely or using stealth technology beyond our detection threshold. Velrus felt that flutter in her secondary stomach again, stronger now. Could they have provided incorrect coordinates? Unlikely, as the precision of the original transmission suggests deliberate accuracy. Thane manipulated his console, expanding the scan radius. I'm detecting no anomalies within 50,000 kilometers of the target location. Then perhaps we're early, suggested Sub-Commander Kella, the delegation's cultural liaison. The timestamp gave us a 72-hour window. We're arriving with 4 hours to spare. Or perhaps, Dravix said quietly, this is a test. They want to observe how we react to ambiguity. Velrus considered this. It would be consistent with certain predatory species, those who valued initiative and aggression over protocol. The Torvan had used similar tactics before formal contact, testing whether potential rivals would enter unknown situations. Maintain approach vector, Velrus decided. Passive sensors only. I want no indication of hostile intent, but keep active defense systems on standby. The harmonious Accord glided forward, its crew silent with anticipation. Through the viewport, the starfield remained unchanged, beautiful, indifferent, empty. Arriving at coordinates, navigation announced. Relative velocity, 0. Position confirmed. Velrus stood at the observation deck, scanning the darkness. Nothing. They floated in a void between stars, exactly where humanity had directed them. Minutes passed, then an hour. Ambassador, Thane said softly, our scheduled arrival time has passed. Still no contacts, no signals, no. The communications console chirped. Every head turned. Velrus felt her respiratory spiracles contract involuntarily. Incoming transmission, the communications officer reported, his voice tight. Audio only. Origin point. He paused, manipulating his console with increasing urgency. Origin point uncertain. Signal appears to be omnidirectional, but I can't trace the source. Play it, Velrus ordered. A voice filled the bridge. Human, unmistakably so. Female. Measured, with a quality that reminded Velrus of deep water, calm on the surface, but suggesting vast depth beneath. Crethian vessel, Harmonious Accord. This is Ambassador Chen of the Human Diplomatic Corps. Thank you for meeting us at the designated coordinates. Before we proceed, I want to ensure you understand that you are in no danger. What you are about to experience is a demonstration, not a threat. Please maintain your current position and prepare for visual contact. The transmission ended. Velrus exchanged glances with her senior staff. Dravix's combat posture had intensified, his scales darkening to battle-ready crimson. Thane's eyes were fixed on his sensor displays, searching for something, anything that might explain the voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Sensor sweep, Velrus commanded. Maximum intensity. I want to know where that transmission originated. Scanning now, Thane responded. His manipulators moved rapidly across the controls. "Ambassador, I'm reading. This doesn't make sense." "Report." "Passive sensors show normal background readings, but when I increase sensitivity, Thane's scales rippled with something Velrus had never seen before. Fear. There are quantum fluctuations, hundreds of them, scattered in a sphere around our position, roughly 200,000 kilometers radius. Quantum fluctuations occur naturally, Kella said, though her voice lacked conviction. Oh, not in this pattern, not this symmetrically distributed. Thane looked up from his console. These fluctuations suggest mass distortion, significant mass, but I'm detecting no physical objects, no energy signatures, no— "Contact!" the sensor operator shouted. "Multiple contacts. Bearing, all bearings. They're—" Reality shifted. One moment the viewport showed empty space. The next, it showed ships. Velrus's respiratory system seized. Her primary and secondary stomachs clenched simultaneously. Her scales locked in place, rigid with shock. Ships. Dozens of them. No, more than dozens. Hundreds? The sensors were screaming contradictory data, trying to catalog vessels that shouldn't exist, that hadn't existed seconds before. "Report!" Velrus managed to force the word through her paralyzed vocal crest. Thane stared at his displays as if they had betrayed him. 47 contacts. No, correction, 47 capital class contacts. They're arranging in formation around us. Perfect sphere. Distance, 200,000 kilometers on all vectors. 47? Dravix moved to the tactical display, his combat training overriding his shock. 47 capital ships? That's not a diplomatic escort. That's a battle fleet. But Velrus barely heard him. She was staring at the viewport, at the nearest of the human vessels, and her mind was struggling to process what her eyes were showing her. The ship was massive. Not merely large, massive in a way that defied her understanding of naval architecture. The Harmonious Accord was a respectable vessel, 300 meters in length, representing the Commonwealth's finest diplomatic engineering. The human ship dwarfed it. "Size estimate," she whispered. "Calculating." Thane's voice had gone hollow. "Primary contact, approximately 2,000 meters. Length, not width. Mass estimate." He recalibrated his instruments. "This can't be right. The mass reading suggests the equivalent of a small moon." "And there are 47 of them," Kella breathed. Velrus forced herself to think, to push past the shock. They were here, the entire time. Hidden somehow. Stealth technology, Thane confirmed. But the energy requirements for hiding a ship that size would be— and to hide 47 simultaneously. He looked at Velrus, his scales now pure white, the color of existential uncertainty. "Ambassador, this represents a technological capability several orders of magnitude beyond our projections." The communications console activated again. The same calm voice, Ambassador Chen, but now Velrus could hear something she'd missed before. Not arrogance, not aggression, but certainty. The absolute certainty of someone who held every advantage and knew it. "I apologize for the dramatic reveal. We find that visual demonstrations communicate more effectively than lengthy technical specifications. I'm currently aboard the HDSV Architect, positioned at your 2 o'clock high relative bearing. May I come aboard your vessel for our discussion?" Velrus's mind raced. Every diplomatic instinct screamed at her to maintain protocol, to insist on neutral ground, to reassert some measure of control over this situation. But those instincts had been developed for negotiations between comparable powers. Nothing about this situation was comparable. "Commander Dravix," Velrus said quietly, "what is our tactical situation?" The security commander's response was immediate, professional, and utterly devastating. We are completely surrounded by superior forces. Our weapons range, maximum 2,000 kilometers. Their current position, 200,000 kilometers in all directions. They could destroy us before our targeting systems achieved lock. Tactical assessment, hopeless. Could we retreat? Our maximum acceleration, 0.7 standard G. Their size suggests proportional engine capacity. They would overtake us within minutes, and Drevix gestured at the tactical display. Look at their formation, Ambassador. Perfect sphere, exact spacing. Coordinated to the meter. This wasn't hastily assembled. This was planned, calculated, and executed with precision we couldn't achieve with our entire battle fleet. Velrus felt the weight of realization settling over her like a physical thing. They had come here expecting to negotiate from strength, backed by the Commonwealth's 17 systems and its formidable navy. Humanity had responded by revealing that strength was relative, and the Commonwealth had fundamentally miscalculated the scale. How long? Velrus asked Thane. How long were they here, hidden, before revealing themselves? Thane reviewed his sensor logs. Based on the quantum fluctuation patterns, they were in position before we arrived, which means they knew our approach vector, our speed, our exact arrival time. He paused. Had his scales flickering through rapid color changes, his species equivalent of nervous system overload. They were waiting for us. The implications cascaded through Velrus's mind. Humanity hadn't just responded to their diplomatic message with coordinates. They had predicted exactly when the Commonwealth would arrive. They had positioned a massive fleet in advance. They had remained hidden, undetected, until the moment of their choosing. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a lesson. Ambassador Chen, Velrus said, activating their communication system. Her voice remained steady through sheer force of diplomatic training. You may come aboard. We welcome the opportunity to meet face to face. Thank you, Ambassador Velrus. Preparing transport now. I'll be accompanied by 2 aides, all unarmed, in accordance with diplomatic conventions. We'll arrive at your primary docking port in approximately 8 minutes. The transmission ended. 8 minutes, Kella said softly. That's not enough time to shuttle from one of those ships, unless they were already close, Dravix finished. Closer than 200,000 kilometers. Hidden, just like the fleet. Velrus turned from the viewport, from the impossible sight of 47 Titan-class warships arranged in perfect formation around her vessel. She needed to prepare, to gather her thoughts, to salvage what she could from a diplomatic situation that had transformed into something she didn't yet have words for. Senior staff with me. We greet Ambassador Chen with full diplomatic honors. She paused at the bridge entrance. And someone find me our intelligence briefings on humanity. And I want to know if we missed any indication that they were capable of this. As she walked through the corridors of the Harmonious Accord, Velrus felt the ship differently now. Its walls, which had seemed so solid and protective during their journey, now felt like paper. Its weapons, which had seemed adequate for a diplomatic mission, now felt like children's toys. And somewhere beyond those walls, hidden until the moment they chose to be seen, the humans waited. They had sent coordinates because words were unnecessary. The coordinates were the message, and Velrus was only beginning to understand what they meant. Ambassador Chen was shorter than Velrus had expected. The human woman who materialized in the Harmonious Accord's primary docking bay stood perhaps 1.5 meters tall, barely reaching Velrus's mid-thorax. She wore a simple dark uniform with minimal ornamentation, her black hair pulled back in a functional style. Her 2 companions, both male, flanked her at a respectful distance, their postures relaxed but attentive. Nothing about her appearance suggested power. Nothing about her demeanor suggested threat. Yet Velrus felt her respiratory spiracles constrict as those dark human eyes met hers. Ambassador Velrus, Chen's voice carried the same calm quality as her transmissions. She performed a slight bow, one of the human gestures Velrus had studied. "Thank you for receiving us. I hope our arrival didn't cause undue alarm." Velrus returned the gesture with a formal Crithian greeting, her manipulators forming the triple loop of diplomatic respect. "Ambassador Chen, your demonstration was certainly effective, though I confess, all your methods are unconventional." A slight smile touched Chen's lips. "Humanity has learned that some conversations benefit from shared context. Please, may we speak somewhere more comfortable?" They processed through the ship's corridors to the diplomatic chamber, a circular room designed for formal negotiations, with seating arranged to accommodate multiple species. Velrus's senior staff took their positions. Dravix at Security Station, Thane at the Science Console, Kella at Cultural Liaison. Chen and her aides settled into the human-compatible seating with practiced ease. One aide opened a compact data terminal. The other simply observed, his eyes moving with a calculated precision that reminded Velrus uncomfortably of a predator tracking prey. "Ambassador Velrus," Chen began, all folding her hands on the table in a gesture that somehow conveyed both openness and finality. "You sent us a message requesting negotiations regarding territorial boundaries, trade frameworks, and mutual defense protocols. Your message was well-crafted, thorough, and diplomatically impeccable." "Thank you," Velrus said carefully, "though your response was less detailed. Yes, the coordinates." Chen's expression remained neutral. "Let me explain why we responded as we did. Your diplomatic package included 17 linguistic frameworks, cultural sensitivity markers, and 3 proposed meeting dates spanning several months. It was the work of experienced diplomats who understand their craft." Velrus felt a small surge of vindication. At least humanity recognized professional competence. "However," Chen continued, and that single word carried the weight of gravitational collapse, "your entire message was predicated on a fundamental misunderstanding. You approached us as though we were peers engaged in a negotiation between comparable powers. You assumed that humanity required months to prepare for discussions. You assumed we needed time to analyze your cultural frameworks and consider your proposals." The human woman leaned forward slightly. "You assumed we didn't already know everything about you." Silence crashed through the diplomatic chamber. I'm not certain I understand," Velrus managed. Chen gestured to her aide, who activated the data terminal. A holographic display materialized above the conference table. Velrus stared at it, her compound eyes struggling to process the impossible detail. It was the harmonious accord. "So a complete technical schematic, rotating slowly in the air, but not just the external hull, internal systems, power distribution networks, weapons arrays, sensor configurations, everything." "Your ship," Chen said quietly. "Diplomatic cruiser, Veritex class. Commissioned 18 standard years ago at the Krythus Orbital Yards. Crew complement, 217. Current power output, 73% of maximum capacity. Your primary shield generators have a recurring calibration issue. You compensate by running them at elevated temperature, which reduces their efficiency by approximately 11%. Thane made a choking sound. Velrus couldn't blame him. "Your propulsion system," Chen continued, her tone remaining conversational, almost gentle, uses a beryllium core plasma drive. "Oh, fairly standard for your technological level. Maximum acceleration, 0.7 standard G. Jump capability, 8 light-years per cycle. Your sensor range is approximately 4 million kilometers for active scans, 2 million for passive." The schematic dissolved, replaced by a star map. The Crithian Commonwealth's territory lit up in blue, all 17 systems, with trade routes, military installations, and population centers marked in precise detail. "The Crithian Commonwealth," Chen said, 17 colonized systems. Total population, 43 billion. Primary economy, rare earth element processing, and mid-tier technological manufacturing. Your military consists of 214 capital ships, approximately 1,500 support vessels, and orbital defense networks around your 6 most populous worlds. Velrus felt her scales locking in place, her body's involuntary response to existential threat. Your current government, Chen continued as the display shifted to show Krithian political structures, is a representative technocracy led by the Council of Progressors. Current council head, Excellency Thrain, who authorized this diplomatic mission 3 months ago. The Council is facing internal pressure from the expansionist coalition, who believe the Commonwealth should assert more aggressive territorial claims in this sector. How? Velrus's voice cracked. She forced herself to continue. How do you have this information? Chen's expression shifted, not quite sympathy, but something close. Understanding, perhaps. Ambassador, humanity has been monitoring this sector for 6 standard years. Your species, along with 14 other major powers, have been under continuous observation since we established our border. We know your languages, your cultures, your technologies, your politics, your military capabilities, and your strategic doctrines. The holographic display changed again, this time showing the sensor logs from the Harmonious Accord's journey to these coordinates. Velrus recognized the data streams, their own records, somehow captured and analyzed. We detected your vessel the moment it crossed into proximity of human-claimed space, Chen said. 71 hours ago, we tracked your approach vector, calculated your arrival time, and positioned our fleet accordingly. We've been monitoring your internal communications. We know about the 17 speeches you prepared, Ambassador Velrus. We know Commander Dravix advised against coming. We know Science Director Thane is currently experiencing significant physiological stress. Thane's scales had gone completely white. The coordinates we sent you, Chen continued, her voice still maddeningly calm, were not an invitation to negotiate. They were a demonstration site. We brought you here, to this empty sector of space, to show you something your intelligence services would never have discovered through conventional means. Velrus found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Your fleet. Our fleet, Chen confirmed. Specifically, the 3rd Diplomatic Enforcement Group, 47 Titan-class vessels, each capable of independent stealth operation, each carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet. And Ambassador, I need you to understand something crucial. This is not our military. This is not our defense fleet. This is not our deterrent force. The human woman's eyes never wavered. This is what we assign to diplomatic missions when we want to ensure our neighbors understand context. The room felt as though all oxygen had been extracted. Your entire species, Velrus heard herself say. How many ships? I can't share that information, Chen interrupted, though not unkindly. But I can tell you that the vessel I arrived in, my personal diplomatic transport, is currently hovering 300 meters from your docking bay. It's been there since before you arrived at these coordinates. Your sensors never detected it, even now, knowing it's there. Oh, your instruments can't find it. Dravix checked his tactical console. His scales flickered through colors too rapidly to interpret. Confirmed, he whispered. Nothing on sensors. Chen gestured, and the holographic display shifted once more, showing a sphere, the perfect formation of human ships surrounding the Harmonious Accord. This formation, Chen explained, was established 43 minutes before your arrival. Every ship achieved position within a 2-second window. The coordination required to accomplish that, the sensor integration, the computational precision, the communication security, represents capabilities your civilization won't develop for approximately 200 years, assuming current technological progression rates. Velrus felt dizzy. Her secondary stomach was in full revolt. But the technology isn't the point, Chen continued. Power projection isn't the point. What I need you to understand, Ambassador, is that humanity operates on a different timescale than you anticipated. You prepared for 3 months. We've been preparing for 6 years. You came here to negotiate territory. We've already mapped every asteroid, every resource deposit, every strategic position within 50 light-years of this location. The human woman stood, her small frame somehow commanding the entire room. You sent us a diplomatic package proposing negotiation. We sent you coordinates because negotiation implies uncertainty, 2 parties exploring mutual benefit through discussion. But Ambassador Velris, there is no uncertainty here. We know what we want. We know what you want. We know what terms you were authorized to accept, what concessions you were forbidden to make, and what your fallback positions are. Chen walked slowly around the table, her movement unhurried, almost relaxed. We know that Commander Dravix has standing orders to initiate combat protocols if human vessels display overtly hostile formations. We know that Science Director Thane is recording this conversation on a quantum-encrypted channel to Commonwealth intelligence. We know that Cultural Liaison Kella has a personal bias toward peaceful resolution based on her experience with the Zenthera contact protocols. Each person she named reacted with visible shock. We even know, Chen added, stopping directly in front of Velris, that you have a prepared speech about mutual prosperity and the benefits of cooperation. It's a good speech, well written, emotionally compelling. You spent 8 hours refining it. Velris's world had narrowed to those dark human eyes. So when you asked us to negotiate, Chen said softly, we faced a choice. We could engage in the diplomatic theater you expected, months of discussions, careful proposals and counterproposals, the gradual revelation of capabilities and intentions. Or we could send you coordinates and show you, in one clear moment, exactly who you're dealing with. The human ambassador returned to her seat. We chose clarity over comfort. For a long moment, no one spoke. The holographic display continued to rotate slowly, showing the impossible. Human ships, human knowledge, human capabilities that defied everything the Commonwealth thought it understood about this sector. Finally, Kella broke the silence. What do you want from us? Chen smiled, genuinely this time. Velris thought, or at least as genuinely as a human could. Cultural Liaison Kella. To answer your question, we want peace. We want clear boundaries. We want trade conducted under fair terms. We want the same things your diplomatic package requested. Then why? Kella gestured helplessly at the display, at everything. Because peace requires foundation, Chen replied. You came here thinking humanity was a minor power, perhaps slightly advanced, certainly negotiable. If we had accepted that premise, if we had engaged with your diplomatic framework, you would have left believing you could challenge us, test our borders, probe our defenses. Other species would have drawn the same conclusion. The human woman leaned forward. Wars happen, cultural liaison, when one side misjudges the other's capabilities, when pride exceeds wisdom, and when leaders commit to courses of action based on faulty intelligence. We brought you here to prevent that misjudgment. Chen activated her own data terminal. Here are our terms for peaceful coexistence with the Crithian Commonwealth. They are fair, they are balanced, they account for your legitimate interests and our security requirements. There are no tricks, no hidden clauses, no traps. A document materialized in the holographic space, dense with text, organized with bureaucratic precision. You'll find, Chen continued, that these terms are almost identical to what your council authorized you to accept as an optimal outcome. We're offering you exactly what you came here hoping to achieve. Then what? Velris struggled to form coherent thoughts. If you're giving us favorable terms, why this demonstration? Why the intimidation? Not intimidation, Chen corrected gently. Education. You need to return to the Commonwealth with a complete understanding of reality. Yes, you'll have your treaty. Yes, your mission will be a diplomatic success. But you'll also carry back the truth. that humanity isn't a peer, isn't negotiating from uncertainty, isn't hoping for favorable terms. The human woman stood again, preparing to leave. Humanity is offering peace from a position of absolute knowledge and overwhelming force. We're choosing cooperation because it aligns with our values, not because we require it for security. That distinction matters, Ambassador. It will shape every interaction between our peoples for generations to come. Chen moved toward the exit, her aides following. At the doorway, she paused. One final thing, Ambassador Velris. And I mentioned that we've been monitoring this sector for 6 years. During that time, we've observed 47 distinct military or exploratory vessels from various species pass through or near human-claimed space. The Harmonious Accord is the first vessel we've chosen to contact. Velris's scales rippled. Why us? Why now? Because your civilization is ready for the truth. Because your council, despite its flaws, values stability over conquest. Because we analyzed 17 different first contact scenarios, and this one offered the highest probability of long-term peaceful coexistence. Chen's expression softened slightly. And because you, Ambassador Velris, have the psychological resilience to process what you've seen here and communicate it effectively to your leadership. The human woman bowed, that same slight gesture of respect. Or review our terms. Take all the time you need. When you're ready to proceed, simply broadcast acceptance on the frequency we provided. We'll formalize the agreement immediately, and if we don't accept, Dravix asked, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. Then we remain neighbors who understand each other's capabilities. The 3rd Diplomatic Enforcement Group will remain on station until you depart. We'll continue monitoring Commonwealth space for security purposes. And we'll wait for the next diplomatic mission, or the next, or the one after that. Eventually, every civilization in this sector will understand what you understand now. She turned to leave, then paused once more. Oh, and Commander Dravix, your tactical assessment earlier was correct. No, but it was also incomplete. You calculated that we could destroy your vessel before your weapons achieved target lock. What your sensors didn't show you is that we have positioned a defensive field around the Harmonious Accord. If any external threat, another ship, a rogue asteroid, even a micrometeorite, approaches your vessel, our systems will intercept it. Chen smiled. We brought you into our space, Ambassador. While you're here, we consider your safety our responsibility. And with that, the humans left. The diplomatic chamber remained silent for nearly a full minute after they departed. Then Thane spoke, his voice distant, almost dreamlike. They've been protecting us. This entire time, we've been surrounded by their battle fleet, and they've been protecting us. Velris looked at the holographic treaty still rotating in the air. Oh, fair terms, balanced agreements, everything the Commonwealth had hoped to achieve, offered by a species that could have simply taken what they wanted. Commander Dravix, she said quietly, send a message to Commonwealth Command. Priority 1 encryption. Message content, Ambassador? Velris stared at the treaty document, at the impossible schematics, at the sensor logs showing ships that shouldn't exist. Tell them we've made contact with humanity. Tell them the diplomatic mission is proceeding as planned. She paused, choosing her next words with absolute precision. And tell them that every strategic assessment we made about this sector was wrong, not incomplete, not slightly off, fundamentally, comprehensively wrong. She looked at her senior staff, at Thane's white scales, at Kella's stunned expression, but at Dravix's combat-ready posture that no longer had any target. Tell them, Velris continued, that we're not negotiating with humans. We're accepting the terms of a species that has already won a war we didn't know was being fought. Through the viewport, 47 Titan-class vessels hung in perfect formation, their weapons dark, their presence absolute. Humanity had sent coordinates, and the Crethean Commonwealth had learned what those coordinates meant. The harmonious accord remained at the coordinates for 6 hours. Velrus spent those hours reading. Every word of the human treaty, every clause, every provision, every carefully constructed paragraph that somehow managed to be simultaneously generous and absolutely non-negotiable. The terms were better than the Commonwealth had dared hope for. Territorial boundaries that respected existing Crethean colonies, trade frameworks that offered genuine mutual benefit, technology exchange programs, limited but real, mutual defense clauses that protected both species' interests. It was perfect. That was what terrified her. They knew, she said aloud, though no one else was in her private quarters. They knew exactly what we needed, what we'd accept, what would make our council look successful. Because of course they did. They'd been watching for 6 years. Her console chimed. A message from Thane. Analysis complete. Recommend you review immediately. Velrus pulled up his report. The science director had spent those same 6 hours just running every test his instruments could manage on the human vessels, trying to extract some usable intelligence from their brief appearance. The report was 13 pages of variations on the same theme. Impossible. Power output calculations that exceeded theoretical maximums. Hull materials that shouldn't exist. Weapon signatures that defied physics as the Commonwealth understood it. And the stealth technology, Thane had written an entire section analyzing how the humans had hidden ships massing millions of tons, and his conclusion was simply, we don't know. We can't even formulate a working hypothesis. A second message arrived, this one from Dravix. Tactical assessment attached. Recommend immediate transmission to Fleet Command. Velrus opened it, though she knew what it would say. She was wrong. It was worse than she'd anticipated. Dravix had calculated engagement scenarios. 47 different simulations of theoretical combat between human forces and Commonwealth military assets. He'd been thorough, adjusting variables, considering terrain advantages, even factoring in scenarios where Commonwealth forces had advance warning and prepared positions. Every simulation ended the same way, total Commonwealth defeat, time frame measured in minutes. In the unlikely event of hostilities, Dravix had written in his typically clinical style, recommend immediate surrender. Continued resistance would serve no strategic purpose and would result in unnecessary casualties. The technological disparity is comparable to primitive chemical weapons facing orbital bombardment. Velrus closed the report. Her manipulators trembled slightly, a physiological response she couldn't quite suppress. Oh, a soft chime indicated someone at her door. Enter. Kella stepped inside, her scale showing the pale green of contemplative uncertainty. Ambassador, I've been reviewing human cultural data, what little we have. I thought it might help us understand their approach. And? They have a concept. They call it speak softly and carry a big stick. It means projecting power through restraint rather than aggression. Show strength, but don't use it unless necessary. Kella settled into a seat, her posture conveying exhaustion. I think that's what we just experienced. Ambassador Chen's entire demeanor, calm, respectful, almost gentle, while surrounded by enough firepower to crack planets. Psychological warfare, Velrus murmured. Maybe. Or maybe just truth. Kella gestured helplessly. They didn't threaten us. They showed us reality and let us draw our own conclusions. That's actually more effective than threats, isn't it? Threats can be dismissed as bluster. But this? This was proof, Velrus finished. They sat in silence for a moment. Through the viewport, the human fleet remained visible, a constant reminder of humanity's presence, their patience, their overwhelming advantage. I'm going to accept their terms, Velrus said finally. Not because they're generous, though they are. Not because they're fair, though they are. But because refusing would be, she searched for the right word, suicide. Kella supplied quietly. I was going to say pointless, but yes, potentially suicide as well. Velrus activated her command console. Summon the senior staff. We'll review the treaty one final time, then transmit our acceptance. 30 minutes later, they gathered in the diplomatic chamber, the same room where Chen had casually dismantled every assumption they'd brought with them. Objections? Velrus asked, though she knew the answer. Dravik spoke first. From a security standpoint, these terms are acceptable. Better than acceptable. They establish clear boundaries, reducing the risk of accidental conflict. The Mutual Defense Clause actually provides some protection against third-party threats. Science and technology perspective, Thane added, his scale still showing stress white at the edges. The technology exchange provisions are limited, but that's understandable, given the disparity. What they're offering, basic material science, and some agricultural techniques, those are genuine benefits without strategic risk to them. Culturally, Kella said, the treaty respects our sovereignty. There are no requirements to adopt human customs or modify our government. They're not seeking to dominate us politically, just to establish stable coexistence. Velrus looked at each of them. So we're agreed? We accept? Do we have a choice? Dravik asked. There was no bitterness in his voice, just pragmatic acceptance. There's always a choice, Velrus replied. We could refuse. We could attempt to flee. We could return to the Commonwealth and recommend military buildup, defensive preparation, territorial consolidation. And in 6 years, Thane said softly, or 16 years, or 60 years, we'd still be facing the same reality. What humanity would still have capabilities we can't match, and by then they might be less patient. Velrus nodded slowly. Draft the acceptance message. Formal diplomatic language, full recognition of terms, authorization under my authority as appointed Commonwealth representative. As her communications officer worked, Velrus found herself thinking about Chen's final words. You have the psychological resilience to process what you've seen here and communicate it effectively to your leadership. Was that true? Could she make the Council understand? Not just the treaty terms, but the fundamental shift in galactic reality that humanity represented. Message ready, Ambassador, the communications officer reported. Transmit on the frequency they provided. The message went out. For 17 seconds, that same impossible response time, there was silence. Then the reply came. Ambassador Velrus, this is Ambassador Chen. We acknowledge receipt of your acceptance. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for your wisdom and your courage. The treaty is now in effect. We look forward to peaceful coexistence with the Krythian Commonwealth. A pause, then Chen's voice continued, carrying a warmth that hadn't been present during their face-to-face meeting. Safe travels, Ambassador. We'll escort you to the border of human-claimed space. Not because we don't trust you, but because we'd like to ensure no other species misunderstands your presence in our territory. The transmission ended. On the tactical display, the 47 Titan-class vessels began to move. Not dispersing, Velrus realized, repositioning, forming a protective corridor. They're actually going to escort us, Dravik said, something like wonder in his voice. A full battle fleet, just to make sure we get home safely. It's a message, Velrus replied. Not to us, to everyone else watching. This is what happens when you negotiate with humanity in good faith. You get everything you came for, and they protect you while you leave. And the other message? Kella asked quietly. The one they're not saying out loud. Velrus stood, watching the impossible ships arrange themselves with mathematical precision. This is what we assign to diplomatic missions. This is what happens when we want to ensure our neighbors understand context. She turned to face her senior staff. The message is, imagine what we assign to actual threats. The harmonious Accord began its journey back to Commonwealth space, surrounded by ships that could have destroyed it in seconds, but instead formed a protective shell around it. As they traveled, Velrus began drafting her report to the Council. Not the official diplomatic summary, that would come later. This was the unofficial communication, the one that would be read in closed session, the one that would shape Commonwealth strategy for decades to come. Council of Progressors, first contact with humanity has been achieved. The diplomatic mission was successful. We have secured a treaty that meets or exceeds all authorized objectives. However, I must report that our strategic assessments were fundamentally flawed. Humanity is not a minor power. They are not our peers. They are not participants in the regional balance of power. They are the balance of power. I am attaching full sensor logs, technical analysis, and tactical assessments. I urge you to review these materials personally before making any decisions regarding human relations. The Commonwealth must understand, we are not negotiating with humans. We are accepting the terms of a species that could end our civilization with less effort than we would expend conquering a single, undefended world. They have chosen peace. We should be grateful for that choice, and we should never, under any circumstances, give them reason to reconsider it. Respectfully submitted, Ambassador Velrus. She encrypted the message, marked it for Council eyes only, and queued it for transmission the moment they reached Commonwealth space, through the viewport, while human ships paced them with effortless grace, protecting them, monitoring them, reminding them. "Navigation," Velrus called out. "How long until we reach the border?" 14 hours at current speed, Ambassador." 14 hours surrounded by humanity's casual display of overwhelming power. 14 hours to process what they'd learned. 14 hours to prepare for the conversation that would reshape the Commonwealth's entire strategic doctrine. Velrus settled into her command chair, watching the stars slide past. They had come seeking negotiation and found revelation. They had expected discussions and received education. They had hoped to establish beneficial relations with a new species. Instead, they had discovered that humanity had already been watching, waiting, knowing. The coordinates hadn't been an invitation. They had been a classroom. And the lesson was complete. The water of human-claimed space appeared on the Harmonious Accord's navigation display exactly 14 hours later, marked by nothing but mathematical coordinates. No stations, no beacons, no physical demarcation. Just a line in space that humanity had drawn, and the galaxy was learning to respect. As they approached that invisible boundary, the 47 Titan-class vessels began to decelerate. "They're breaking escort formation," Dravix reported, his voice carrying none of the tension it had held during their journey to the coordinates. He sounded tired now, drained by the weight of revelation. "Repositioning to... They're forming up behind us. Single-line formation." Velrus moved to the viewport. The human ships arranged themselves in perfect synchronization. A wall of impossible power positioned exactly at the border. Not threatening, not aggressive, simply present. A final message. The communications console activated one last time. Ambassador Chen's voice as measured and calm as it had been throughout this entire encounter. "Ambassador Velrus, you are now leaving human-claimed space. The treaty between our peoples is in effect as of this moment. We've transmitted the full documentation to Commonwealth Command on your behalf. They received it approximately 7 minutes ago." 7 minutes. The humans had sent the treaty to the Crithian government before the Harmonious Accord even reached the border. Another small demonstration of their reach, their capabilities, their perpetual position of knowing more than their counterparts. "On behalf of humanity," Chen continued, "I want to thank you again for your professionalism and your wisdom. You came seeking understanding, and I believe you found it, though perhaps not in the form you expected." A pause, and Velrus heard something new in the human ambassador's voice. Not superiority, not satisfaction. Something almost like respect. "Your report to the council," Chen said quietly. "The unofficial one you drafted 4 hours ago. It will serve your people well. The truth is difficult, Ambassador Velrus, but it's also a gift. Better to know reality and adjust than to remain ignorant and stumble into tragedy." Velrus felt her respiratory spiracles contract. They had been monitoring even that. Her private communications, her encrypted messages, her personal thoughts committed to text in what she had believed was secure transmission. Of course they had. "Setsu, you have our gratitude for choosing honesty in your account," Chen added. "Some ambassadors might have softened the truth, protected their egos, or tried to minimize what they witnessed. You chose to give your leadership the unfiltered reality. That took courage." The human woman's voice shifted, taking on a formal quality, the tone of someone speaking not just to Velrus, but to everyone who would eventually hear this recording. "The Creathian Commonwealth is humanity's first formal treaty partner in this sector. We hope it will not be our last. What happened at those coordinates? The revelation, the demonstration, the truth, it wasn't meant to humiliate or intimidate. It was meant to establish foundation. Peace requires clear understanding. My cooperation requires honest assessment of capabilities and intentions. We showed you who we are because we respect you enough to offer truth instead of comfortable lies." Velrus activated her own communications channel. Her final words to humanity, at least for now. She chose them carefully. "Ambassador Chen, the Commonwealth acknowledges the educational nature of this encounter. You've given us much to consider, and even more to report. I suspect my government's response will evolve over time, as the full implications of what we've learned become clear." She paused, glancing at her senior staff. At Thane's exhausted slump, at Dravix's 1,000-yard stare, at Kella's contemplative stillness. "But I want you to know," Velrus continued, "that despite the shock, despite the fear, despite everything we thought we knew being proven wrong, I'm grateful. You could have remained hidden. You could have let us continue in ignorance until some crisis forced revelation under worse circumstances. Instead, you chose this moment, this method, this mercy. The Commonwealth will honor this treaty, not because we fear humanity, though I won't insult your intelligence by denying that we do, but because you've shown us that peace is possible even across vast disparities of power. That strength doesn't require cruelty, that knowledge can be wielded with precision instead of malice." Velrus drew in a long breath. "Safe travels, Ambassador Chen. I suspect we'll speak again." "I'm certain of it," Chen replied, and Velrus could hear the smile in her voice. "Until then, Ambassador Velrus, may your journey home be peaceful, and your words to your leaders be heard." The transmission ended. The harmonious accord crossed the border, leaving human-claimed space behind. Behind them, the 47 Titan-class vessels remained in formation, a silent wall of power marking the boundary. Then, one by one, they vanished. Not departing, Velrus understood that now, simply returning to the invisible state that was their natural condition. Fading from sensors, from sight, from detection. Returning to the quantum shadows from which they had emerged. Within 90 seconds, the viewport showed empty space. The sensor displays showed nothing. Even knowing exactly where those ships had been positioned moments before, Thane's instruments detected no trace of their presence. "They're still there," Thane whispered. "Aren't they?" "Yes," Velrus replied. "They're still there." Still watching, still monitoring, still ensuring their borders remain secure. "Forever?" Kella asked. "Until they decide otherwise," Velrus said, "which means yes, effectively forever, or at least until the rest of the galaxy learns what we learned." The harmonious accord accelerated toward Commonwealth space, toward home, toward the difficult conversations that awaited. Behind them, invisible guardians maintained their vigil. The Council of Progressors received Ambassador Velrus in closed session 6 days later. She stood in the circular chamber where the Commonwealth's 15 most powerful individuals gathered to shape policy. She had stood here before, receiving her mission assignment, listening to their confident predictions about humanity's probable capabilities and negotiation strategies. Every prediction had been wrong. Ambassador, Council Head Thrain began, his scales showing the deep blue of administrative concern. Your official report is comprehensive. Your unofficial communication was even more so. I provided what I witnessed, Excellency. Nothing more, nothing less. You provided nightmare fuel, interjected Councillor Drevik, the expansionist coalition's most vocal member. His scales showed aggressive red. Invisible fleets, impossible technology, total surveillance capabilities. Either you're exaggerating to cover diplomatic failure, or humanity represents a paradigm shift in this sector's balance of power, Thrain interrupted smoothly. The censor logs support Ambassador Velrus's account. Science Director Thane's technical analysis has been reviewed by our best minds. Their conclusions align with the ambassador's report. He turned his full attention to Velrus. The treaty you secured is favorable, better than we had any right to expect. Why do you believe humanity offered such generous terms? Velrus had spent 6 days considering that exact question. Because they can afford to be generous, Excellency. When you possess overwhelming advantage, you have the luxury of choosing kindness over exploitation. Humanity wants stable neighbors, not subjugated ones. They want trade partners, not tribute states. They want peace, not because they need it, but because they prefer it. And if we had refused their terms, another counselor asked, they would have waited, watched. Eventually, some other species would have accepted, and the Commonwealth would have found itself increasingly isolated and was surrounded by civilizations that had made peace with humanity while we remained stubbornly independent. Isolation isn't necessarily disadvantageous, Drevik began. Isolation is fatal when your neighbor can read your private communications, map your military assets, and predict your strategic decisions with absolute accuracy, Velrus interrupted, her voice harder than she'd intended. Counselor, humanity has been watching us for 6 years. 6 years. They know us better than we know ourselves. Refusing their terms wouldn't be independence. It would be self-delusion. The chamber fell silent. Thrain's scales rippled through shades of contemplative blue. The question before us, then, is not whether to honor the treaty. Clearly, we must. The question is how we adapt to this new reality, and how the Commonwealth positions itself in a galaxy where humanity exists. We could seek allies, suggested another counselor, other species who might feel threatened by human power. A coalition of species that humanity has already been monitoring for years? Velrus's voice carried no mockery, only weary pragmatism. They would know about such a coalition before we finished proposing it. They would know its structure, its goals, its military preparations, and eventually they would respond. You sound as though you believe resistance is hopeless, Drevik said coldly. I believe, Velrus replied, choosing each word with precision, that humanity has offered us a choice. Accept reality and prosper, or deny reality and suffer. They're not asking us to become subservient. Oh, they're asking us to be rational. She gestured at the holographic display showing the treaty terms. Look at what they've given us. Trade access to human markets. Their technology is centuries ahead, but they're offering fair exchange for our raw materials and cultural goods. Technology sharing. Limited, yes, but genuine knowledge transfer. Mutual defense. They're pledging to help protect us from external threats, and most importantly, they're respecting our sovereignty. No demands to change our government, our culture, our way of life. All they ask, Velrus continued, is that we acknowledge reality, that we don't test their borders, don't attempt espionage against them, don't seek to undermine their security. These aren't the demands of a conqueror. They're the boundaries of a neighbor who wants to be left in peace. Thrain stood, and his posture conveying decision. The Council will honor the treaty. Furthermore, I'm authorizing Ambassador Velrus to continue as our primary liaison with humanity. Her experience, difficult as it was, makes her uniquely qualified for ongoing diplomatic relations. And the other species in this sector? Asked another counselor. Do we warn them? Share what we've learned? Velrus considered this. Humanity will reveal themselves to others in their own time, in their own way. But yes, if asked, I believe we should be honest about our experience. Other civilizations deserve the same truth we received. She paused, then added, though I suspect humanity would prefer if that truth came from direct contact rather than second-hand accounts. They seem to value experiential learning. A few counselors made sounds that might have been dark amusement. One final question, Ambassador, Thrain said. In your personal assessment, do you believe humanity poses an existential threat to the Commonwealth? Velrus thought about Ambassador Chen's calm voice, about 47 ships arranged in perfect formation, about being protected even while being shown their own powerlessness, about generous treaty terms offered from a position of absolute strength. No, Excellency, I believe humanity poses an existential opportunity. They could have presented themselves as conquerors. Instead, they chose to be neighbors. The threat isn't humanity, it's our potential inability to accept what they're offering. 3 months later, 2 moribund species in the sector reported receiving unexpected transmissions from humanity, on just coordinates and a timestamp. The Vakaran hierarchy sent a science vessel. The Molkari Confederacy dispatched a diplomatic cruiser. Both returned with treaties. Both returned changed. Within a standard year, 7 species had established formal relations with humanity. The treaty terms varied in details but shared common elements: clear boundaries, fair trade, mutual defense, and most significantly, genuine respect for sovereignty. No conquests, no subjugation, no demands for tribute or subservience, just truth, delivered with overwhelming precision, followed by offers of peaceful coexistence. Ambassador Velrus attended a multi-species conference 18 months after her encounter at the coordinates. She found herself in conversation with Ambassador Chen again, and this time in a more relaxed setting, a reception hall aboard a neutral station. 7 treaties, Velrus said, swirling the liquid in her glass. How many more are you planning? Chen smiled. As many as necessary, as many as choose wisdom over pride. And the ones who choose pride? We continue watching, continue waiting, continue hoping they'll eventually choose differently. Chen's expression grew more serious. Humanity doesn't want conquest, Ambassador. We've seen where that leads. We've lived through it in our own history. We're not interested in repeating those mistakes on a galactic scale. So you offer truth instead, Velrus said. Forced revelation backed by impossible power. Would you have preferred comfortable lies? Chen asked quietly. Would you have preferred we remained hidden until some crisis made contact inevitable? And until misunderstanding led to conflict? Velrus thought about that, about the fear she'd felt at those coordinates, about the reports she'd written, the nightmares she'd experienced, the fundamental recalibration of her entire worldview. No, she admitted finally, I wouldn't have preferred lies. But I won't pretend the truth was comfortable. The best truths rarely are, Chen replied. She raised her glass in a human gesture of respect. To uncomfortable truths and peaceful futures. Velrus returned the gesture with a Krathian equivalent. To species wise enough to accept both. As the reception continued around them, as diplomats from multiple species mingled and negotiated and slowly adjusted to the new galactic reality, Velris found herself thinking about that day at the coordinates, about humanity's choice to send numbers instead of words, about the lesson hidden in those numbers. Some things couldn't be negotiated because negotiation implied uncertainty. And there was no uncertainty in coordinates, just clear, precise, undeniable truth. Humanity had sent coordinates because words were for equals who trusted each other. The galaxy had needed to see who humanity was first, needed to understand, needed to accept reality before cooperation could begin. It had been brutal in its honesty. It had been shocking in its revelation. It had been, Velris finally admitted to herself, exactly what the galaxy needed. Because peace without understanding was just delayed conflict, and humanity, it seemed, preferred lasting solutions. What do you think about this clash between alien expectations and human precision? I need you to share your thoughts below, and remember to like and subscribe for more HFY stories.